Yesterday marked the grand opening of the new high-speed train. Starting today, I no longer have to worry about driving to work. I'm genuinely happy to have it. If not for this train, the ridiculously long commute to my company would continue to steal more of my time. The distance from my house to the company is 60 kilometers. Every day, I had to wake up earlier than most people just to get ready for work. I've missed out on so much time with my children because of this job. We no longer have those quiet mornings eating breakfast together or those warm evenings telling bedtime stories. It's heartbreaking to think about all the moments I could have spent with my family. My name is Dessen. I live in a rather densely populated area. I have a wife and 2 children. Because of the long commute from home to work, the relationship between my children and me has grown more distant every day. I come home exhausted, just wanting to rest, with no energy left to talk to my kids. We used to have joyful evenings together, talking and playing, but now everything has changed. So when I heard about the new high-speed train, I was beyond excited. This train doesn't just save me travel time, it brings hope that I can finally spend more time with my family. I envision mornings that aren't rushed anymore, evenings where I can sit beside my kids, help them with their homework, and listen to their stories. This morning, I woke up with an unusual sense of excitement. I quickly got ready and left the house. The high-speed train station isn't far from my home, just a short walk away. When I arrived at the station, I saw a large crowd waiting. Everyone looked just as eager as I was. I stepped onto the train, found a seat by the window, and sank into the chair. The train began to move, the sound of wheels rolling on the track filling the space, the scenery outside flashing by in a blur. I felt so relaxed, as if all the stress from previous commutes had melted away. I closed my eyes and smiled, thinking about what the future might bring. However, the joy didn't last long. An older man sitting next to me started talking about strange rules when riding the high-speed train. He said there were unwritten rules that no one dared to break. At first, I laughed it off, thinking it was just a joke, but the seriousness on his face made me feel uneasy. "What are those rules?" I asked, half joking. He looked at me with a deep, mysterious gaze. "You'll find out soon enough, if you want to stay safe." His words gave me chills. I tried to shake off the negative thoughts, focusing on the joy of saving time. But deep down, an unsettling feeling lingered like a dark cloud floating in a clear blue sky. The next morning, I returned to the high-speed train station with the same eagerness as the day before. The train had already helped me save a considerable amount of travel time, allowing me to enjoy breakfast with my family, and even read a bit before heading to work. However, the old man's words from the previous day still haunted me. I kept telling myself it was just the playful nonsense of an elderly man, but I couldn't shake the worry inside me. When the train arrived, I stepped on and found a seat. Today, I decided to sit somewhere different, farther from the window, just for a change of atmosphere. Next to me was a young woman who was deeply engrossed in her book. I greeted her, and we began chatting. Her name was Lynn, and she also worked far from home and had been using the high-speed train for a few days. During our conversation, I couldn't help but bring up the story of the old man from yesterday. Lynn chuckled and said she had also heard about those unspoken rules. According to her, not everyone knows about them, and only regular passengers gradually start to notice. "I don't think it's something to be too worried about," Lynn said, "but if you want, I can tell you a few things I've heard." I nodded, curious to learn more. Lynn began explaining. "First, do not change seats while the train is moving." Lynn explained that changing seats mid-ride could lead to unfortunate events. Some people had tried and experienced strange mishaps, from losing their belongings to minor accidents. Second, do not speak loudly on the train. Everyone either keeps quiet or speaks in whispers. Lynn said she once saw a man talking loudly on his phone, and suddenly, the train lost power for a few minutes. Everyone believed it was punishment for breaking the rule. Third, do not fall asleep on the train. This was the one Lynn emphasized the most. She said a friend of hers once fell asleep and woke up in a completely unfamiliar place with no signs or landmarks. It took him hours to find his way back to a recognizable location. Hearing all this sent a chill down my spine. Even though I wasn't sure how true these stories were, I still felt it was important to be cautious in the days ahead. I made an effort to follow the rules Lynn had mentioned. I didn't switch seats, kept quiet, and tried not to fall asleep. Everything seemed to go smoothly, and I began to settle into the routine of taking the high-speed train. However, one morning, when I boarded the train, I saw the old man from before sitting in the same spot. He looked at me and gave a slight nod as if to greet me. I gathered my courage and approached him to ask more about the strange rules. He smiled, a mysterious and unreadable smile. "Only time will tell," he said slowly. "But remember, always be careful and pay attention to your surroundings. The high-speed train is not just a means of transportation, it carries secrets that not everyone knows." His words made me reflect even more on the rules and mysteries of this train. I promised myself to stay alert and cautious, not just for my own sake but for the loving family waiting for me every day. The mysteries of the high-speed train were only beginning, and I would continue to uncover them, bit by bit, with both curiosity and caution. In the following days, I gradually adapted to my new routine with the train. Everything seemed to go well, and I began to feel more comfortable. The stories about the unspoken rules still lingered in my mind, but I chose not to let them affect my daily life too much. However, one event changed that mindset. One morning, as I boarded the train and found my seat, I sensed a tense atmosphere. People seemed uneasy, exchanging wary glances. I picked a seat near the back of the car and began reading. It wasn't long before I heard loud talking coming from the front of the car. I looked up and saw a group of young men laughing and speaking loudly. They didn't care about anyone around them and were clearly violating the "no loud talking" rule. Everyone around looked at them with disapproval, but no one dared to say anything. The group continued making noise, even getting up and moving between rows. One of them sat in another passenger's seat just as that person had gotten up to leave the train. A wave of unease washed over me, reminding me of Lynn's warning about not changing seats while the train was in motion. As the train entered a tunnel, the lights in the car suddenly flickered a few times and then went out completely. The entire car was plunged into total darkness. The group's laughter stopped, replaced by anxious and frightened whispers. My heartbeat quickened as I tried to stay calm and listen to what was happening in the dark. I heard quick, heavy footsteps, as if someone was running on the train. A scream rang out from the front of the car, sending shivers down my spine. When the lights came back on, I saw one of the young men lying motionless on the floor, eyes wide open in terror. The others in his group stood frozen, faces pale as paper. The old man I had seen before appeared out of nowhere, walked over, and whispered something into the young man's ear. He trembled, stammering, but couldn't utter a single word. Everyone on the train stared at the scene in horror. "This is the price of not following the rules," the old man said coldly. "The high-speed train is not just a means of transport, it's a world of its own, with its own rules. If you don't follow them, you'll have to face the consequences." Hearing those words, I felt like I was being pulled into a nightmare. The stories Lynn had told, the old man's warnings, they all became clearer than ever. I looked around and saw that everyone's eyes were filled with fear and worry. The train continued moving, but the tension in the car lingered. No one dared to speak. We all just looked at each other in silence, hoping the journey would soon be over. When the train stopped at the next station, the group of young men hurriedly got off, leaving behind an emptiness and a heavy sense of unease. I continued the journey, but my mind was no longer at ease. The unspoken rules of the high-speed train were no longer baseless rumors, they were real, and they had to be respected. I reminded myself to always stay cautious, not just for myself, but for the family waiting for me at home each day. In the days that followed the incident with the young men, I felt an even greater need to be careful when riding the high-speed train. The unspoken rules were no longer distant ideas, they were a clear and haunting reality. I kept reminding myself every day, always follow the rules, always stay quiet, never switch seats, and most importantly, never fall asleep on the train. However, life's busyness and the stress of work began to wear me down. One morning, after a late night of work and little sleep, I felt completely exhausted. I tried to stay awake, but my body wouldn't cooperate. When I boarded the train, I chose a seat near the window and told myself I'd just close my eyes for a moment, but sleep quickly took over, pulling me into a deep dream. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I felt was confusion. The train was still moving, but the scenery outside was completely unfamiliar. There were no tall buildings, no recognizable landmarks, only a desolate, barren land with no signs of life. I looked around and saw other passengers waking up too, many with the same panicked expression on their faces. I immediately remembered Lynn's warning about not falling asleep on the train. My heart pounded as I worried about where we had been taken. I stood up, trying to find the old man to ask him what was going on, but he was nowhere to be seen. All I saw were the bewildered and frightened faces of other passengers. I decided to walk through the train to gather more information. As I moved through the cars, I noticed everyone was trying to make sense of what had happened. Some people were trying to open the doors, but it was useless, the doors were tightly sealed. Anxious whispers filled the air, creating a tense and suffocating atmosphere. Eventually, I encountered a middle-aged man who seemed calmer than the others. He looked at me with a knowing expression and said he had experienced this before. "We are in a place that doesn't belong to our world," he said. "I don't know exactly where this is, but I know we need to find a way back." I asked him about the rules and how to return, but he only shook his head. "There are no clear rules for this. We can only hope the train takes us back, if we continue to follow the warnings we've been given." A feeling of confusion and helplessness washed over me. I didn't know how long we had been trapped in this strange world or how to get back. But one thing was certain, I needed to find a way out of this situation, not just for myself, but for the family waiting for me at home. I decided to return to my seat and sat down, trying to stay calm. I closed my eyes, focused my thoughts, and searched for a solution. During that moment, the sounds around me faded, and I felt as if I were being drawn into another dream. When I opened my eyes, I was still on the train, but the scenery outside the window had changed. This time, I saw green fields and small houses, like a classic painting. I didn't know where I was, but there was a strange feeling that I was getting closer to finding the answer. This bizarre journey didn't seem to be just about traveling from one place to another, it was also about uncovering the hidden secrets of this world. I knew I couldn't continue living in fear and confusion. I needed to find a way out of this place and return to normal life. But first, I had to understand more about the strange rules and the mysteries this high-speed train was hiding. After waking up in this unfamiliar world, I felt as if I had wandered into a land full of danger and enigma. The train kept moving, but the scenery outside the window grew increasingly strange. No longer were there green fields or small houses, instead, terrifying and surreal images appeared. As I looked out the window, I began to see strange creatures. First were monstrous beings with horrifying appearances, they had gigantic bodies, pale green skin, and glowing red eyes. They wandered across the desolate fields, sometimes coming close to the tracks and staring straight at the train. Their growls echoed into the train car, making everyone inside feel anxious and frightened. Once, as the train passed through a dense forest, I saw shadows slipping through the trees. Looking closer, I realized they were ghosts. They had hazy forms, moved as fast as lightning, and emitted cold whispers. A chill ran down my spine as I thought about all the ghost stories I had ever heard. The other passengers also noticed the presence of these spirits, and the tension inside the train was thicker than ever. It didn't stop there. As the train continued into another area, I saw enormous snakes slithering around the hills and caves. They had long, thick bodies with shimmering scales that reflected the sunlight. Each time the train passed by, the snakes raised their heads and let out terrifying hisses. Once, a massive snake even tried to climb onto the train. Luckily, the train accelerated just in time and left it behind. While I was still trying to make sense of everything, the train entered a rugged mountainous area. I looked out the window and saw giants standing atop the cliffs, gazing down at the train with curious eyes. They were enormous, tens of meters tall, with bulging muscles and rough, stone-like skin. Some of the giants held massive boulders in their hands, as if ready to hurl them at the train at any moment. The train slid past beneath them, and I could feel their piercing and commanding gaze upon us. These monstrous beings made me feel as though I were living in a never-ending nightmare. I didn't know what else I would have to face next, but I knew I had to be stronger and more alert than ever. The unspoken rules of this high-speed train were no longer just guidelines for safety, they were the keys to surviving in this monstrous world. As the train entered another tunnel, I noticed the light outside the window gradually disappearing and the space around me darkening. I sat down, closed my eyes, and tried to concentrate. The strange creatures I had encountered were only part of the trials I had to endure. I needed to find a way out of this world and return to my normal life. The hissing of snakes, the growls of monsters, and the cold whispers of ghosts still echoed in my mind. But I knew I couldn't let them take control of my thoughts. I had to stay brave and keep going, no matter how difficult or dangerous the journey became. When the light returned, the train had exited the tunnel and entered a new land. I opened my eyes and looked around. The scene before me was another world, filled with surreal and unbelievable sights. The journey seemed endless. After the high-speed train emerged from the tunnel and moved into this new land, I began to grow accustomed to the strange phenomena. But what I was about to witness was far more terrifying than anything I had seen before. One afternoon, as the train glided across a vast prairie, I looked out the window and noticed sparkling lights in the sky. At first, I thought they were stars or aircraft lights, but when these lights started moving in odd, unnatural patterns, I began to suspect otherwise. I squinted, trying to see more clearly, and realized they were not airplane lights. The way these lights moved, at incredible speeds and along impossible trajectories, was unlike anything I had ever seen. Soon, I understood what they were: UFOs. They hovered in the sky, circular in shape and glowing with a shimmering blue light. My heart began to race. The UFOs moved closer and closer, and eventually, they started attacking the train. A powerful beam of light shot directly into the car, making the entire compartment shake violently. Everyone on board screamed in panic, gripping their seats and trying to stay upright. A loud explosion echoed, and I saw one side of the train car had been heavily damaged. The windows shattered, metal panels bent, and electric sparks shot out from broken equipment. Still, the train continued to move, though slower and far less smoothly than before. I tried to remain calm and looked around. Passengers were in chaos, some injured by flying debris. I rushed to help a woman holding her child tightly, trying to comfort and protect them from the shattered glass. Meanwhile, the UFOs kept attacking, firing lasers and triggering explosions all around the train. Suddenly, I spotted the old man from previous trips. He stood firm amid the chaos, staring at the UFOs as if he were trying to find a way to counter them. I ran to him, hoping he had some kind of answer to our situation. "What do we do now?" I shouted over the noise of the explosions. He turned to me, his gaze stern. "We must stay calm and trust the train. It has the ability to repair itself. But we must protect each other and not give in to panic." Following his words, I turned back to help the other passengers. Some were trying to administer first aid, while others worked to shield themselves from debris. In this moment of crisis, people instinctively began cooperating, regardless of whether they were strangers. As the train continued moving, I noticed the UFOs seemed to be retreating. Perhaps they realized the train wasn't as easy to destroy as they had thought. The train staggered forward, bearing the deep scars it had sustained. Though it continued its journey, the damage was evident. Several cars were severely wrecked, electrical systems flickered, and many passengers were injured. Yet, miraculously, the train didn't stop. It kept pushing ahead, as if some invisible force was guiding and protecting it. I sat down, exhaling deeply in relief but filled with concern. The UFO attack had shown me that this journey held far more danger and trials than I had imagined. But I knew I had to keep going, not just for my own safety, but for the safety of everyone on board. This strange train continued its path, and I had no idea what the next destination would be or what awaited us ahead. After the first attack by the UFOs, the high-speed train was severely damaged but still continued moving forward. However, the atmosphere inside the train became more tense than ever. The groans of the injured, the cries of those who had lost loved ones, and the overwhelming stench of blood filled everything. We thought we had temporarily escaped danger, but we were wrong. The UFOs were not the only threat. One evening, as the train moved into a rugged mountainous area, monstrous creatures began to reappear from the shadows and treetops. These terrifying beasts with massive size, shaggy fur, and razor-sharp claws started approaching the train. Their glowing eyes pierced the darkness, and they emitted horrifying growls. These creatures showed no hesitation. They charged at the train, smashing windows and attacking passengers. Chaos erupted. Screams, cries, and the roars of the beasts merged into a nightmarish cacophony. I tried to protect myself and those around me, but there was little I could do against the overwhelming power of the monsters. One particularly large creature lunged at me, its claws digging deep into my shoulder. The pain was excruciating, blood streamed down, but I struggled with all my strength to escape its grasp. Just then, the UFOs returned in the sky. They began firing laser beams at the train, triggering massive explosions and escalating the chaos. The train cars shook violently, many parts suffered further destruction. People were thrown around, some buried beneath the wreckage. I looked around and saw a horrifying scene, blood and bodies piled upon one another, internal organs, hearts, livers, lungs, scattered across the floor, creating a vision straight out of hell. The survivors looked no different from walking corpses, their eyes filled with terror and hopelessness. I tried to stay calm, but the pain and the gruesome sight nearly pushed me over the edge. I needed to find a way out of here, but I had no idea what to do or where to go. The train kept moving, but it seemed to no longer have a clear destination. The UFOs and the monsters continued their assault, not giving us a single moment of peace. Amidst the chaos, I heard the scream of a child. I turned and saw a little girl trapped under a pile of debris. Despite my injuries, I dragged myself toward her. I used the last of my strength to pull her out and bring her to a safer corner of the train. Sitting down, I looked into her eyes and saw panic and fear. I held her tightly, trying to comfort her and shield her from the surrounding danger. Even in this hopeless situation, I knew I couldn't give up. I had to keep fighting, not just for myself, but for everyone else still alive. At that moment, I felt the train begin to slow down. The UFOs and monsters seemed to be retreating, leaving behind a trail of destruction and bloodshed. The high-speed train was now just a heavily damaged carcass, bearing deep wounds. In the brief silence, I wondered whether we still had any chance of survival. This attack had left deep scars, both physical and emotional, on everyone aboard. Amid the chaos and carnage, as I held the girl close in my arms, a brilliant light suddenly appeared inside the train car. The light was warm and radiant, so bright I had to shut my eyes. But soon after, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. When I opened my eyes, standing before me was an angel with pure white wings, a graceful face, and kind eyes. The angel radiated a shimmering light that left everyone in awe, temporarily making them forget their fear. The angel gently approached me, eyes full of compassion and understanding. "I know what you've been through," the angel said, "and the pain you're enduring. But there is still hope. I am here to help you escape this twisted world." A spark of hope flickered in my heart. How could I escape from here? This train seemed to have no end, and monsters were everywhere. The angel nodded, voice gentle but resolute, "That's right. This task will not be easy. You must reach the front car of the train and stop it. Only then can you be released from this place and return to your normal life. But the path to the first car is filled with dangers, with many monsters lying in wait." Looking into the angel's pure eyes, I knew I had no other choice. I had to accept this challenge to save myself and the others. "I'll do it. Tell me what I need to do." The angel smiled, wings gently fluttering like a cool breeze. "You must be brave and persistent. Protect the weak and hold on to your faith. I will always be by your side, guiding and shielding you from the dangers ahead." With that promise, the angel disappeared, leaving me with a newfound sense of determination. I looked around and saw that everyone had heard the angel's words. They seemed empowered, strengthened with faith, ready to face the trials to come. I stood up and looked toward the front of the train. The path to the first car was not short, and it was full of threats. But I knew I couldn't give up. I had to walk forward, with courage, for the survival of all of us. I began moving through the train cars, alert to every sound and movement around me. Each step had to be cautious, as monsters could appear at any moment. The others followed behind, forming a small but united group. We knew that only through cooperation and protecting one another could we overcome these trials. As we approached a car soaked in blood and bodies, I heard growls coming from up ahead. The group paused, mentally bracing for the attack. And then, the monstrous creatures emerged, charging at us with terrifying speed. The battle began. We fought with all our strength, using whatever makeshift weapons we could find on board. Screams, roars, and the clash of weapons echoed throughout the train. Blood soaked the floor. But we didn't stop. I knew I had to lead, to protect everyone and guide them to the first car. Amid the fierce battle, I felt a soft light envelop me. The angel appeared again, using his wings to shield and protect us from the beast's brutal attacks. With his help, we slowly pushed the monsters back and continued moving forward. At last, after a long and grueling fight, we reached the front car. But the monsters didn't stop coming, they tried desperately to keep us from reaching our goal. I knew I had to keep going, to fight to the very end. With determination and the angel's guidance, I stepped into the first car. The door opened, revealing the train's control system before me. I knew this was our only chance to stop the train and free us all. I placed my hand on the controls, feeling the weight of the moment. With one decisive move, I pulled the lever and stopped the train. The train shuddered violently, and for a moment, it felt as if time stood still. When the train finally came to a complete stop, I looked around and saw everyone collapsing, exhausted but with eyes full of hope. The angel appeared once more, smiling gently and nodding in approval. "You did well. Now, you and the others shall be set free. Remember, it was your courage and unity that helped you all overcome this challenge." As I pulled the lever and brought the train to a halt, a brilliant light enveloped me and all the remaining survivors. I felt my body grow lighter as the space around me faded. Everything became blurry and silent, replaced by a profound sense of peace and tranquility. The light grew so bright that I had to shut my eyes. When I opened them again, I found myself standing in a completely white space, with no beginning or end. The angel stood before me with white wings and kind eyes. "Dessen, you have done well," the angel said, his voice as gentle as a breeze. "But your journey is not yet over. You still have a choice to make." The angel pointed ahead, and I saw two paths appear. One led to a pure white door, soft light gently glowing from within. The other led to a dark door, with no light at all. "You must choose one of these paths," the angel explained. "One leads to eternal peace, where there is no more pain or fear. The other will take you back to your real life, where you must face challenges and hardship, but also joy and hope." I stood in silence, contemplating my choice. The first path offered eternal peace. But I knew that life was not just about joy, it also came with pain and challenges. The second path was filled with hardship, but it was the life I knew, the one with my family, friends, and the people I loved. In the end, I chose the second path. "I choose real life," I said to the angel. "I want to return to my family and friends, no matter how many difficulties I may have to face." The angel smiled, eyes filled with approval. "You've chosen wisely, Dessen. Remember, courage and love will always guide your way." As soon as I stepped through the dark door, a powerful light enveloped me. I felt as if I were being swept into a whirlwind, and everything around me vanished. When the light began to fade, I opened my eyes and found myself sitting on the train, in a relaxed position as if nothing had ever happened. I looked around and saw people chatting and laughing as usual. There was no sign of any attack, no monsters, no UFOs. Everything was back to normal, peaceful and quiet. Was it all just a dream? I wondered, confused. But the pain and the horrifying images were still vivid in my mind. Alan, my colleague, sat across from me and patted me on the shoulder. "John, did you have a dream or something? You look exhausted." I smiled slightly and shook my head. "No, just a dream. Everything's fine." The train continued on its journey, but there were no more strange rules or terrifying sights. I felt relieved, yet puzzled about what I had experienced. Was it truly just a dream? Or a fragment of a strange journey I had actually taken? Whatever it was, I knew that I had returned to real life, to a world with family, friends, and the people I care about. I would keep living, facing challenges and hardships, but also cherishing every moment of peace and happiness. The strange train ride had ended, but the journey of life was still moving forward.